We now move on to examples of God's law, things to which Israel was exhorted to obey. It says, when you seek the place that the Lord your God will choose from among all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling, to that place you must go. There you will bring your burnt offerings and sacrifices, your tithes and special gifts that you have vowed to give, and your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and your flocks. There in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your family shall eat and shall rejoice in everything that you have put your hand to, because the Lord your God has blessed you. Here you have positive encouragements to worship. Worship is to be joyful. Sacrifices and tithes are to be offered in a way in which you rejoice before the Lord. Deuteronomy goes on to talk about other times, the 3 pilgrim feasts, that times a year that you were to go and worship the Lord. Feast of Passover, Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles. It encourages tithing to support the Levites. It encourages the offering of first fruits and tithes. It prohibits idolatry at various points. It prohibits divination practices and magical practices. It condemns false prophecy and gives criteria by which you can test whether someone is a true prophet, particularly prediction fulfillment. It also gives encouragement to treat disadvantaged classes decently. It says, when you make a loan in any of the lands of any kind to your neighbor, do not go to his house to get what he is offering as a pledge. Stay outside and let the man to whom you are making the loan bring the pledge out to you. If the man is poor, do not go to sleep with his pledge in your presence. Return his cloak to him by sunset, so that he may sleep in it. Then he will thank you, and it will be regarded as a righteous act in the sight of the Lord your God. Do not take advantage of a hired man who is poor and needy, whether he is a brother Israelite or an alien living in one of your towns. Pay him his wages each day before sunset, because he is poor and he is counting on it. Otherwise he may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Now this is just one of many laws that deal with disadvantaged classes, debtors, slaves, the poor. Debts were to be canceled every 7th year, and debt slaves are to be set free after 7 years, as Deuteronomy 15 talks about. One, in the passage we just read, one was not to enter a house arbitrarily to get a pledge for a loan, but out of compassion and respect for the dignity of even a poor person. One was to let the poor person bring out the pledge himself, and out of compassion, if he's poor and doesn't have anything to keep warm at night with, you're to give him his cloak back at night when it's going to be cold. And if he's a laborer, pay him in a timely way. He may depend on it for sustaining himself day to day. There are commands about helping the sojourner and the fatherless and the widow. These people, the sojourner was a foreigner who was living in the land. Fatherless is self-evident, and widow is self-evident. These people were vulnerable sorts of people who could be taken advantage of, but they were to be treated decently. And they were to be allowed to glean the fields as an act of charity, as described in Deuteronomy 24. The book of Ruth will pick up on this command. Now here's a law that seems a little strange and not so just at first. It says, when you go to war against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Bring her into your home and have her shave her head, trim her nails, and put aside the clothes she was wearing when captured. And after she has lived in your house and mourned her father and mother for a full month, then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. Now, I like to ask when I go over this passage in classes, what do you think about this law, ladies? And usually the ladies are very uncomfortable with this law. But I'd like to show that it actually has a positive purpose even for the captive woman. This captive woman is probably a non-Israelite woman. She is told to shave her head and trim her nails. And this would have two purposes. These were a part of mourning rites. Shaving your head could be an indication that you're mourning for someone. And she would have lost her family because of the war. But it would do something else. I mean, after all, what is for a woman hair and nails? They're often symbols of beauty. So the first thing she's to do is to make herself ugly by cutting her hair, trimming her nails, which kind of goes along with why the guy wanted her. He found her attractive. Well, make her ugly. And then wait 30 days. Now, this would have two purposes. It would give her some time to adjust to this new situation. But for him, it would be kind of a cooling off period. I mean, why did he want to marry her? Because she was beautiful. Well, now that she's made herself ugly, and he looks at her with her stubbly hair for 30 days, he can think over, do I really want to marry this girl or not? If he does go ahead and marry her, he is to treat her as a wife and not as a slave. If he doesn't want her any longer, he can not sell her as a slave. But she must be given full wifely privileges, which means that if he doesn't want her, the only thing he can do is divorce her. Now, how does this compare with standard operating procedures of war elsewhere? Well, the usual operating procedure of war, when soldiers ransack a city and they see a beautiful woman, the likely thing is that they're going to kill the men and they're going to rape the women. But not in Israel. If you see a beautiful woman that you'd like to have, you have to marry her. You have to give her time to adjust, 30 days before you actually marry her. And then you have to give her full wifely privileges as you would any other wife. And so the motive behind this was a more humane treatment of women captives than would be the ordinary treatment of women in that day. Now, again, you might want to go farther than it does, but it's trying to move the cultural milieu into a positive direction.